Cybersecurity is one of the key themes at Sibos 2018.
And to understand how that threat is changing and the implications for correspondent banking and securities, we're joined by Jim Freis, who's the Chief Compliance Officer for Deutsche Börse Group, and Mark McNulty. Mark is the Head of Clearing and FI Payments at Citibank. Gentlemen, welcome to Sibos TV. Jim, can I start with you, because you've been combating financial crime for over 10 years. So in your opinion, how are cybercrime and cyber attacks evolving?
Well, cybercrime is a constantly evolving threat. They're probing and looking for the weakest links. But really the thing that we see more and more is how sophisticated the schemes are getting. They really understand more and more about our financial business. The thing that doesn't change is they're looking for where the money is. And that's why the financial industry is constantly under threat.
Mark, let's look first at the banking industry. Which threats are most concerning to the community?
Well, I think as a banker, you have to be worried about all different types of cyber threats. You know, whether it's threats that are designed to disrupt, whether it's attacks that are designed to steal information, or whether it's attacks that are, in essence, good old bank robbery and designed to steal money. And I would say, given the conference that we're at, it's worth probably zeroing in on the last one in terms of attacks that are designed to steal money. And I think it's critically aware that banks around the world, are super aware of the level of attacks that are happening and have robust programs in place to help mitigate that risk.
So given that degree of awareness that's required, how can banks best protect themselves from cybercrime and cyber attacks?
Well, first and foremost, banks need to have a robust cyber resilience program in place that's, organized around the principles of, protecting your own environment, detecting if an attack does occur, and then having procedures and protocols in place to respond if an attack does occur. So it's possibly not able to deep dive into any of these things today, but I would say that one critical element that banks need to be have in their mindset is that cybersecurity is not the responsibility of any one function. It's the responsibility of the business in partnership with multiple functions to make sure that a comprehensive response is formulated.
And Jim, in the securities industry, are the threats the same or different to those facing the banks?
It's certainly similar to what Mark said. It's part of a whole concept in your defense mechanism. But in securities, you have more points of attack because you have the issuer of securities, you have the structure under which it's bundled, and there's more players to a transaction before you get to an investor. So each one of those can be a potential vulnerability.
And how should the industry respond to those risks?
I think the aspect that we see is the industry coming together and sharing information in real time, knowing where those threats are coming from and some of the actors, because it's only if we have that response together can we be successful.
Jim, you're the lead for GPI at Citibank, so you've seen firsthand how much faster payments are becoming. What are the implications of faster payments from a fraud prevention perspective?
Yeah, well, GPI is showing, how fast payments are, right? So cross-border payments through GPI are going end-to-end with credit to the beneficiary 50% of the time in less than 30 minutes. So super fast. But, it's important to note that faster payments themselves don't increase the risk of fraud. But it does highlight a couple of key facts. One is early detection of an attack is absolutely key to help in the recovery. The earlier you identify an attack, the much greater chance you have of successfully recovering those funds. It also highlights the need for the industry to have really effective means of interacting with each other to try and stop payments that are fraudulent, that are traveling across the ecosystem. I think historically, this hasn't been a sort of strong point of the industry with manual processes that are clumsy. But again, Swift's GPI initiative in terms of stop and recall functionality is an attempt to do exactly that. It's going to go live in 2019 and will systemize the interaction between banks. So I think these are some of the important elements that are going to help, respond when there are attacks and stop faster payments.
Jim, as the payments community does respond to these cyber threats, what are some of the things the larger organisations can do to help smaller organisations?
Well, speaking from the perspective of a financial markets infrastructure from the Deutsche Börse Group and Clearstream, I'm working very closely with Swift in that regard. It's all about standard setting and the notion that if you're worried about the weakest link, making sure that all players as part of the community have some type of minimum standards and that we're sharing information under a common theme. Swift efforts to develop standard questionnaires, attestations, and sharing information in that regard is critically important.
Okay, and Mark, sharing is collaboration, but what are the barriers to that?
Yeah, without sounding too corny, collaboration first and foremost is absolutely key in this space. And before we talk about challenges, there's a lot of positivity in terms of what's happened already. There's various different intelligence sharing forums around the world that are very effective, that are designed to, in essence, share information on the nature of the threat, and also technical indicators in terms of the actual attacks when they happen, which banks can use as part of their defense. SWIFT's customer security program, a program designed to raise controls in the ecosystem, is by its very nature a collaboration across the industry with SWIFT. So I think lots of positives. Areas that remain challenging in this space is the sharing of personal information on a cross-border basis. So what I'm thinking of in particular is sharing of suspected or known fraudulent accounts at a system-wide level to try and help stop fraudulent payments going into that account in the future. That obviously has restrictions and challenges in terms of how you can share that information. But I think these areas are going to be continued to be looked at. And I guess the critical point is that we really, as an industry, need to critically or aggressively continue to collaborate in this space.
Jim, as we're discussing, the payments landscape is changing so fast. Will this cause a shift in the way liability is assessed if things go wrong?
Oh, certainly. We can talk about all our preemptive and proactive efforts, but that's really the question: who bears the loss when something goes wrong? So some of those questions are: what is reasonable reliance on your customer when there's some type of a fraudulent instruction that comes through? And in the real-time payments arena, you have less time to figure things out. So it really is critical that all institutions look at their contractual relationships, look at what they've said in terms of their expectations for their counterparts.
And Jim, just picking up on something which Mark referred to, in fact, it was about the whole idea of collaboration, because we know that there are some markets where law enforcement and financial institutions are working together, forming public-private partnerships against cybercrime. But how effective are they?
They've been quite effective, and I think particularly in this cybersecurity area, because we have a common enemy and a common threat in that regard. And they actually have created frameworks for sharing information, dealing with some of the aspects and the concerns that Mark raised. We all have to protect customer information and the confidentiality of our data, but there have to be exceptions when it protects the entire system, including against the cybersecurity threat.
It's a really important issue. Now, you're both speaking at Sibos this week. Where can we find you?
So Wednesday, I have two sessions. I'm talking at 10 o'clock, talking about how corporate clients are yielding the benefits of GPI. And then later at 3:30, I'm talking about open banking and the impact of corporate treasurers. And there I have no doubt that cybersecurity and the impact of cybersecurity and open banking will be part of that discussion.
Absolutely. Jim?
I'll be speaking Monday at 1 o'clock on financial crime compliance in the securities industry, looking throughout the entire custody chain, how we can set cross-border standards. And on Tuesday about private-public partnerships at 3:30, again, how we can be more effective in working together to fight financial crime.
It's a busy few days ahead for both of you, but Jim Freis and Mark McNulty, thank you so much for joining us on Sibos TV. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.